Well, this is a bit different than what's normally on my YouTube channel. I've actually owned Wreckfest since it was called Next Car Game back in 2013. I bought it the day it came out and just really never played it a whole bunch. And I figured I would reinstall it because a bunch of my buddies got back into it, and I figured, hey, why not? The game basically has reached its end-of-life state. There's no more DLC coming, so let's try fucking around here with the Carmageddon car doing like a mock super late model race at Hilltop Stadium. Expert damage, realistic difficulty, all the fun stuff turned on, all the driving aids turned off. One of the things that's quite surprising about Wreckfest is, from a pure driving standpoint, it actually doesn't feel too bad, which is going to surprise a lot of people because a game like this isn't really designed to be a simulator, but the underlying driving model itself, because it's been made by Bugbear, who has a history of putting out really high-quality racing games that fly under a lot of people's radar, dating back to the original Rally Trophy in either 2000 or 2001. The driving mechanics are pretty good. Setup for this joint is pretty simple, somewhat soft suspension, long gear ratio, locked diff. Brake balance we're going to leave in the middle, and here we go for our mock qualifying lap while I dial in the controls. I've turned force feedback down because, again, in most arcade racers, FFB is just way too retardedly strong. I don't like dealing with that, so it's I think at like 50% or 45%. I've also reduced the sensitivity, so there's a bit of play in the center of the wheel like you'd find in a real car, so I think about negative 20 sensitivity. Wheel rotation is at 460, other than that, feels pretty good. We're going to roll off P16 of 24 here, and one of the things you learn about Wreckfest very quickly is the AI is suicidal. Not much genuine racing occurs, especially on field sizes this big. They will all pile into each other, slam each other into the wall, do a bunch of crazy shit that has little to do with actual racing. I'm on the fence about whether I like this or not, because having to dodge wrecks like this is really fun and just really hilarious, and the damage model and just the overall visual quality of this game makes it enjoyable to drive through just like track blocking wrecks and see people flip upside down and all that shit. But at the same time, because the AI is so suicidal, they're just constantly finding themselves getting caught up in wrecks and losing huge chunks of time. So hanging out at the back is the superior strategy, and on any sort of long race, makes these events a cakewalk, which you're about to see here. As on lap 2, we're already halfway up through the field. I do wish in this game there was the ability to change the AI mentality and make them less aggressive for longer races, because it would make, you know, these 30 or 60 lap affairs kind of interesting. But so far you can't do that, although I believe there is a mod on the Steam Workshop which I'll have to check out. But even then, when you start turning on mods and stuff in this game, you start disabling progression, or you can't run a career with them. So it's a double-edged sword in that regard. Up to 10th now in lap 4, the field's starting to get a little bit spread out. The cars around me are actually trying to drive a proper racing line, although they're doing quite poorly. Double apexing a corner when they really don't need to. It's kind of strange. You'll see the car in front of me just like smokes the wall. Starting to have to deal with carcasses of various cars on the track, which this game doesn't despawn cars that are taken out of the race, which kind of adds a neat dynamic that you don't see in a lot of racing games. But again, the AI are just not able to drive the track correctly, so it's not much of a race as it is just a game of survival at this point. The AI cars are just like teeing off on each other when they really don't need to, hitting wrecked cars. I'm not sure if I like that or not. Again, it's kind of making this a lot easier than it should be. There are probably going to be cries in the comments saying I'm not playing the game right by trying to race it legit. But at the same time, like, don't give us an option to run 60 laps if the AI can't handle it. A lot of sims and just arcade racers have that issue too, where there's too many options for the user to just outright break the game. And I think we're seeing that here. Like, I thought it would be kind of enjoyable to do a 60 lap oval race in this game, because like the oval racing honestly isn't bad. And I was mistaken. It's actually quite boring now, as I'm just able to pick off the AI cars with relative ease. They really don't have any like self-preservation mentality. They're driving like straight into the wall, as you see there. Swerving erratically all over the track when they don't need to. Coming up on a huge pack here, they just plow into, which takes a ton of them out at once, so I'm going to move up to 3rd place now. Again, we're just 8 laps into this race. We got a lot of race left. And despite being on the highest difficulty, it really doesn't feel like it, because it's just the AI is driving into parked cars. Almost got collected there, but was lucky and bounced off at the right angle. Haven't really received a lot of damage this race. Car's relatively fine. And as we cross the finish line to start lap 9 of 60, there's just 2 cars left in the race, so this is about to get really boring, and I'm going to have to cut a huge chunk of this race out. because the race is pretty much over at this point. In fact, I think second place ends up retiring in this corner. He just destroys his car. Yep, there it is. So the race really is over and should be over. But there's nothing in the game script to say like, hey, you're the last guy on the track. Like it's, you know, there's really no point in being out there anymore. So I'm going to skip ahead to lap 55 to 60. As you can see, this is what the track looks like after everyone's destroyed. This race was very boring for me to run because it was pretty much over within minutes. And I do wish the game just, like, you know, ended it. Like, what the fuck is the point of running out the final 50 laps? Big question a lot of people are going to have is, like, how does this game drive? Again, it's really not bad, as I alluded to in the start of this video. I did notice this game has a hidden traction control mechanic that you can't turn off. In real life, when you're driving on like a loose surface, even in a car with an open diff, if you stab the throttle a few times over like a moderately wet spot, you can spin up the tires freely and build just, you know, a ton of revs and basically do a burnout. In this game, even with a locked diff on dirt, there's only a certain extent to which you can spin up the rear tires before you can notice the power getting cut. But beyond that, the game drives a lot more realistically than even like the videos kind of convey. The cars are really nice and weighty. You can overdrive the front tires, which is basically the ultimate shit test to see if a game's a sim or not. It's really easy to get yourself into trouble and get crossed up, which is, again, not something you see in an arcade racer, so the underlying physics of this game I think are actually quite good. This car, the Eagle R from Carmageddon, to be honest, I expected it to drive more like a sports car, with just a ton of grip, really stiff suspension, and like no body roll at all. I'm not really feeling it in this car. This just drives like a really quick, grippy muscle car. So I'm not so much of a fan of this car in particular, but the rest of the cars in the game, they obviously are like old school muscle cars and like trucks and like, you know, shitty sedans and compact cars from the 80s and 90s, so that makes more sense in that context. This car, I just wish they really went the extra mile to make it behave like a grippy, you know, sports car. You really don't get that here. Anyway, coming around to take the checkered flag, this is a really boring race. I'm actually quite disappointed. It played out the way it did, where everyone was just dead very early on. But the plus side is that this game does have a traditional progression system, which I've talked about in other videos on how I've really disliked games without a progression system. So like the fact that I sat through that race, I'm actually going to level up a whole bunch here, unlock a bunch of parts, and just feel like I accomplished something, other than the game just ending and being like, congratulations, you finished a race, the end. Which is, you know, the reality of playing like boomer-centric racing sims. They don't think you're allowed to have fun, so yeah, I unlocked a few new parts, a few new cars, just for sitting through that, so that's kind of neat. And I didn't even have to be in career mode to do it, so that's another nice touch. You can play this game pretty open-ended, get money, get cash, get XP and all that fun stuff without following, you know, the curated experience. Anyway, might play a bit more of this game.